Back several years ago, my mother had called me on my phone and given me an alert that my niece, Micah, had been missing. It'd been over 12 hours. It's from the night before. This was the next day, lunchtime. I was on my way to get a bite to eat. Just before entering the establishment, I had gotten the phone call. And she said, "Don't worry, they're looking for her." She had gone out for a run, and they're still searching for her to see if something had happened, and they haven't given up hope. And she said, "If you would just please pray about this." I said, okay. I was concerned. I phoned Tina, my wife, right away. She was at work, and alerted her to the situation. And throughout the next several hours, she was in Memphis, Tennessee, many hours away. Her mom and dad, which is my sister and brother-in-law, had driven from their home in Arkansas 2 hours to Memphis to help search. And as the afternoon progressed, the news got worse and worse, and what we had suspected to be true was true. By that evening, late evening, her husband had confessed that he had murdered her. Well, let me clarify. He didn't say I murdered her. He confessed that he had shot her, and that it was an accident. They were out shooting outdoors, and he had had an accident. It killed her, and he had hid the body, and then came up with a story that she had gone out for a run and reported her missing because he said he had panicked. There was a lot of investigating, as you might imagine. They had investigated this over a long period of a day or two and into the next week, and found that a lot of the things that her husband had said at the time weren't true, and really had established that there were a lot of holes in his retelling of exactly what happened. And they had filed charges against him of murder, of which 2 years later he did go to trial. He did plead out before the trial started, and is now serving time in the Tennessee State Penitentiary. And this whole event is really surreal. The whole family gathered in Micah's hometown of Searcy, Arkansas. And as they gathered around my sister and her brother, Casey, and her father, Dennis, and my sister, Terry, surrounding them with love and support, it was just an emotional roller coaster. One thing that I remember clearly to this day, there's things as you live life you don't forget. There's certain smells you don't forget, good and bad. There's certain sounds that you don't forget, good and bad. This is one of those sounds that I have never forgotten. Tina and I had gone to the viewing and the funeral and went to be with the family, as I just said. And the night before the funeral, which was held in a high school gymnasium, they had gathered for just some support time and a viewing. And people came by that, either was or was not going to be able to make it to the funeral the next day, but just to show support to my sister and brother-in-law. But there was a time for the family to gather, and as we gathered, no one was around. It was just immediate family, grandparents on both sides, and cousins, and nieces and nephews. And as we gathered in that room together, they permitted my sister and my brother-in-law and Casey, Micah's brother, to go in the room to be with Micah first, to be the first ones to go in and view her. And I remember there was the door closed, and there was a slight break in time of silence, and we all sat, and it was quiet. And I imagine, I wasn't in the room, the door was closed, but I imagine that's when they opened the casket, and there was just immediately there was an excruciating cry, a gut-wrenching pain, full of pain, just cry. And it didn't end immediately. This went on for what seemed to be 15 minutes. I know that it was probably 2, 3, or 4 minutes. But the sorrow, because this is the first time that family had seen Micah, after she had passed away. I don't know when it was shortly after her birthday. I do know this. It was 2 days after her birthday when she was killed. And the mourning, the sorrow was so heavy and overwhelming that there wasn't a dry eye on either side of that wall. There was sadness in the room with Micah, and there was sadness in the other room next to where she was. Blessed are those that mourn, for they will be comforted. Last week, we looked at blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This week, we're dealing with blessed. Remember, we talked about that last week. Happy, grace, favor. Those who are mourning have blessings, have favor, have grace, for they will be comforted. It was about 1 year later, a year and a few months. It was in June. That happened in April, the beginning of May and the end of April. And the next year in June, I had gone down to my mother and father's for a weekend to visit with my sister. They were in from Arkansas, and to visit with my mother and father and my other brother that still lives down there. Everyone was in, so Tina and I went down for a visit, and Micah's father, Dennis, and I had some time together. We had run a few laps together down the road, and we had also just spent a little bit of time walking around. And I was allowing him to reflect. I was very careful in how I dealt with this situation, how I talked about it, because you're not quite certain. You don't want to not mention it, and yet you don't want to mention it too much. And so what I had told my sister and my brother-in-law and said, I will never bring this up. And that doesn't mean that I don't care. It doesn't mean that I don't want to hear about it. I just want you to know this is where I am, that if you ever need to talk about it, if you ever need to bring it up, you are certainly more than welcome to bring it up at any time and talk to me about this situation. But as for me, I don't want to wear you out. You come speak about it as you want. And that day he did. We talked for maybe 5 minutes about it as we reflected over the past year. And he said, the Bible says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And he said, where is my comfort? And there's a lot of people that feel that way. there's a lot of people who feel let down. They feel that God hasn't been there for them. They feel that if God was this big, powerful, creating being, that he wouldn't allow good people to suffer the way they do. One thing I remember about college is I entered college. I had some classes, and it wasn't just one or two classes. It was several classes, and it wasn't just one or two professors. It was several professors. And I was a counseling major. I was a psychology major. I wanted to be, my first desire was to be a counselor, a marriage and family counselor, and to help people. And as I had taken some of those psychology classes and counseling classes, the professors were always really quick to point out that in today's society, and we're talking some time ago when I was in undergrad, in today's society, people are not so willing to get psychological help, to go get counseling, because it's somewhat, it admits that there's a weakness. And the need for counseling is different than other medical pursuits. Like if you need dental work, you have decay, or you need your teeth straightened, or whatever the case may be, you go to the dentist and he takes care of it. It's visible. It's right there. If you are a doctor and someone has a stroke or a heart attack, and they are revived and they are saved and they're brought back to health, it's visible. That's what's happened in the body, in the mind. There's a broken bone, you go have it reset and move on. But with counseling, everything is unseen. And there is this stigma that when people go get counseling, they're viewed as maybe crazy. And people don't want to save their marriages that way because they don't want to admit this weakness. And I found some truth in that. I've felt that at times in my life when I have needed some counsel through various stations in my life. But however, there's been a change in the past couple decades since I was in college, since I was in undergrad school. There's been a change because we live in a time in this this psychological culture that we only want to solve our problems and not find God. When we hurt, the goal is for immediate recovery or immediate relief. So therefore, we place a higher priority on solving our problems than pursuing God. And it is at that point, I want you to hear me very closely, it is at that point that we have become idolaters and we have become immoral. When we place a higher priority on feeling better and getting better, we place a higher priority on that than we do in pursuing a relationship with God in our trials. That's really where I want to be today. There was a man named Job. Job was like the Bill Gates of his day. He was uber wealthy, the wealthiest man on earth. And not only was he wealthy, but he was very, very righteous. He prayed, he tithed, he was very faithful to God. So faithful that he was concerned about his children, about his family. And so in that concern about his children and family, he would pray not just for them, he would pray over them, he would fast. He was very righteous. He was very concerned. And this week, if you're watching this, or in the next, few days, if you would, just read through the first 3 or 4 chapters of Job. It's in the Old Testament. It's a great book, and it deals with this very thing about suffering and being in mourning and being in sorrow. because there was a time when God was doing his thing, and the angels were presenting themselves to the Lord, and the fallen angel who is the devil, appears before the Lord, and the Lord says, "Hey, what's up?" Yeah, it wasn't that cordial, I'm sure, but we'll just modernize it if you want. We'll make it a little modern. So, "What's up?" And he said, "Well, I'm just walking around to and fro from the earth." God said, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one righteous like him." And that's when the fallen angel Satan said, "Let me have a snap at him. If you give me an opportunity, I will make sure, I'm sure that he will fall. He will deny you and want nothing to do with you. You're protecting him. You're giving him all this stuff." So he said, "Okay, but don't bother his family." And he put some parameters, is what he did. Put some limits on exactly what the enemy, the devil, could do. And so the devil went at him full bore as much as he could. He went right up to the line and didn't cross it as far as the parameters were concerned. And Job did not curse God. So another moment came when the enemy was walking in the presence of God, and he said, "How about my servant Job?" He said, "Yeah, again, you've kept your hands on him. You've put the parameters. I need more. Give me more. Give me more opportunity. Let me have an opportunity to get to him." So I said, "All right, spare his life. That's your parameter." And the enemy went to Job and took away his livestock and his servants and his children and his possessions. And so he was to the point where he was sitting, if you can visualize this, a man sitting on an ash heap, a heap of ashes. And he had sores all over his body, and those sores, he was using pottery to remove the pus out of those sores. That was Job. He went from being Bill Gates to homelessness, to penniless, to loss of family. This man lost on every aspect of his life. He had been hit. And he still did not curse God. I find that amazing. There are some people in the theological realm, there are pastors and teachers and professors and Bible teachers and books written on Job. Job is a pretty well studied, investigated, reported on book in the Bible. And there are some who criticize Job for his reactions and show his weakness. And I'm telling you right now, as I stand before you, I think Job is an incredible man. Righteous, hurting. He's human. I mean, really, we get cut off in traffic and we go ballistic. We go nuts. We find that we have a minor lump in our body somewhere, and we just automatically, our whole bottom falls out of a world. And I'm not making light of your issues. I'm making much of Job's reaction. His whole world has just changed, has just been completely obliterated. And it's him and his wife, and then 4 friends show up to give him counsel. Suffering is inevitable. It's going to happen. It is already happening to everyone who is viewing this. In some way or another, you are going to suffer, whether it's a little or whether it's a lot, like Job, whether it's cancer or you've lost a child like my sister and brother-in-law. And there are people who ask the question, if there's a God, why is there all this suffering? If he's so powerful and if he's so good, if God is in control, why is there all this mourning? Why are there tragedies? I wake up at night and I can't sleep, so I turn the television on and I see these commercials for Shriners Hospital and for St. Jude's Hospital. These people do incredible work helping families who have absolutely no way to repay them. Their children, you see these pictures of children that have cancer, and it breaks my heart. I have children. I have children from 21 down to 8. And I think about these kids. I think about this disease that's in their body, and they can't walk. They have to be wheelchaired or have a walker, or their hair is gone. What about these natural disasters that have been happening for eons of time? Most recently, Nepal, wiping out thousands of people. What about the Christians in the Middle East? Kidnapping women. And I'm reading all these news reports and these things about the Boko Haram as they take these young girls having sex with as many as 200 guys a day and getting impregnated. Some of them they're killing them. These are girls who are Christians. These are girls who are committed to Christ. These are girls who follow Jesus. And these people come in and take them. They go in and behead 50 at a time after torturing them, burning down their houses, burning down their churches, destroying them. If God is so good, why is there all this mourning? Why is there all this suffering? You know, the death of Micah was not sad because she was young when she died. I have sat and even preached funerals of people who have died, who are young, 12. I've been to the funerals of babies who are 8 and 9 days old. I have been to the funerals of those who are 13 and 15 and 19. And what I surmise out of this experience is that it's not sad just because they're young. My father just turned 80 last week. 80 years old. He's an octogenarian. And if he passes away, and when he passes away, not if, we all will, unless the Lord comes back, it'll still be very, very sad. We were made for living. So regardless if one is 8 or 12 or 19 or 80, death is not what we were created for. God created us for life. So why does all this happen? Why is there this suffering? Why did my sister and brother-in-law have to embrace this mourning as their own, this tragedy? Why do they have to embrace this tragedy as their own? You can trace it all the way back to our great-grandparents, Adam and Eve. Suffering has been with us ever since Adam and Eve. They were in the garden, and God had created this creation, and it was good. Read through Genesis chapter 1. It was good. It was good. The trees were good. The water was good. The skies were good. The animals were good. The earth was good. Man was very good. Everything that he created was good. There was no sin. There was no death. There was no disease. There was no natural disasters. And the enemy appears just as he appeared and plagued Job. The enemy appears. And he tempts Eve and tempts Adam and they fall. And nothing has been the same ever since. Ever since Adam and Eve, nothing has been the same. They were removed from the garden. Creation became corrupt. Death became a reality. Disease became a reality. The reign of evil became a reality on this earth. Our bodies changed. They began to age and decay. That was never the plan. That was not what we were created for. These things happen not because God made them happen. They happen because the enemy is at work. And I will tell you that ever since Adam and Eve, there has been evil, and there have been tragedies, and there have been reasons for mourning ever since then. You look not too much further in the book of Genesis, you don't get very far, and you find that one brother, Cain, killed his brother Abel. Immediately. That's what happened right in the book of Genesis at the very beginning. Tragedy in that family. All because he was jealous, because he was envious, because he couldn't handle what Abel had done. You don't have to go very much further than that. But you meet Adam and Sarah, who invited Hagar into their bed, so they would have the first swingers party that's mentioned in the Bible. And Adam and Sarah convinced Hagar to join, and Abraham impregnates her. And then a whole host of problems all the way up to this day happened because of that. You don't go very much further in the book of Genesis and you meet a Jacob and Esau, two brothers who were fighting, who were battling, a trickster in Jacob who was always tricking everybody. You don't go much further than that. You meet Jacob and his sons who hated Joseph so much that they faked his death, even though some of them wanted him to die. They faked his death and sold him into slavery, making his father mourn because he was the favorite son. Mourn and hurt. And it was that Joseph who was either a slave or in jail for 13 years. He was in jail. I get bent out of shape when it's just a few days. It's a few hours of suffering. I'm looking for relief right away. Suffering has been around forever. When I was younger, I had a family. I had a career. I had an education. I had a lot of things going for me. There were a lot of things going for me at that time. And subsequent to that experience, I got in a place in the marriage where she didn't want to stick around anymore. And there had been trouble along the way. And what I had decided to do ultimately was to just pursue things that I wanted to do. After she decided to split, after we decided that it was over, I said that pleasure will now be the king of my life. That it's most important. Pleasure was the passion that I pursued. I felt that I had given and given and given, and as a result of that giving, that it's not working for me, and I just want to be pleased. I want to be pleased. I want to do what I want to do. And so that's the life that I lived. And we live in this time where we crave a cure. And I say this to you because I've been through it, and I know that there are some of you, most of you who are watching this, who are suffering in some way. Your marriage isn't what it needs to be, or it's over. Your boss or somebody you work with, or many people that you work with, it's not working. You're miserable. You have a child who isn't doing what he should or what she should be. And you have prayed over them, and you have fasted over them. Or if you're not a Christian, you have worried over them. And I will tell you this is a lot of times the advice that we need to hear is not necessarily the advice that we want to hear. I'm not here to tell you that there's a shortcut, and here's 5 steps to that shortcut of ending suffering. The fact of the matter is that in the Bible, a lot of times suffering lasted for a long time. As I said previous, Joseph was in slavery for 13 years, or in jail. 13 years. And we live in this society where, we have instant. We turn our TVs on there. I remember when I was younger, when I would turn the television on, I could leave the room, go and prepare a snack, and come back, and maybe it would be on at that time because it was on a tube. It was a tube TV. Not tube as in the tube, and now we have flat screens. It was tubes in the back. It wasn't solid state. I remember those days. And now we have TVs. We were lucky if we had 2 in the house. Now we have 1 in every room. In my office, I have 4 screens. 4 that could be used as a television. I just used 1. But 4 just in my office. I would have to sit and think about what we have in the house. It's different. When we turn the TV on, it's on instantly. When we microwave food, things are warm instantly. We don't have to wait on the oven to warm up. We have instant rice. We have instant headache cures. We want it speedy, speedy, speedy. We want it now. And that's how we're conditioned. That's how we're trained. That's how we are marketed to. When we see these commercials and these products, it talks to us about how much better our life would be if we had this now. I can make a phone call on a phone while I'm in my car. I do not have to stop the car, find change, and then go to a payphone and stick it in there to see if there's something I need to pick up on the way home from somewhere. Instant. And we've been so catered that we get things instantly that it's hard for us to pursue a relationship with the Lord while we are in our pain. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. I will tell you today that short-term pleasure brings long-term pain. Short-term comfort. The way I chose to pursue things when I had a rough spot, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to calm myself, and relieve my stress, relieve my mind by doing things the way I want them to be done. It will bring long-term pain, whether you are a believer or an unbeliever. The Bible says you reap what you sow. If you sow to the flesh, you will reap destruction. And that is precisely what happened to me. And it is precisely what's happening to so many people in this community right here and in Groveport. They are sowing to the flesh. They are trying to solve their problems with short-term solutions, and they are reaping destruction. It's destroying our families. It's destroying our children. It's destroying our schools. It's destroying our community. Sowing to the short-term flesh will reap destruction. And it is so appealing. Trust me, I know that it's appealing. I understand that there's an appeal, there's a temptation to want to follow that route. I look at Job and how he dealt with suffering, and I look at how I and some of us today deal with it, and what he decided to do was pursue relationship. If you read the whole book of Job, he never swore, he never cursed God. He was blessed in the end. He never disowned God. He pursued that relationship. He didn't walk away. He didn't curse God and die. Even though his own wife was saying, just curse God and die. Just get this over with. Put yourself out of your misery. One of the descriptions of Jesus, I want you to hear me here as we close. One of the descriptions of Jesus was he was the suffering servant. The suffering servant. John chapter 11, and if you'll turn there, because we're going to spend just a little bit of time here as we close. I'm going to make two applications before we close. Two applications to this text. John chapter 11, Jesus hears that his good friend Lazarus, he had a really good relationship with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Doesn't really mention much, but other than you can tell, it's implied by the passage that they were all really tight. And they had sent word to Jesus. It wasn't by text message. It wasn't by cell phone. It took a while to get to him. I don't know how it got to him, but today I can tweet, I can email, I can text message, I can call, I can do all sorts of things and get my message to whomever I need to reach. They got a message to Jesus that Lazarus was ill. And Jesus said, verse number 4, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God might be glorified through it. And so he stayed where he was with the apostles for a few days. And as he was teaching them, he said this word, bump down to verse number 15, and it's for your sake that I am glad I wasn't there, so that you may believe. At this point, Lazarus had gone to sleep. In other words, Lazarus had passed away. And he remained away, and then he showed up to Lazarus's house, and it had been 4 days. He shows up to the house, and Martha runs out to him. Mary stays in the house, and Martha throws her arms around him and says, if you would have only been here. I know you, Jesus. I know that you could heal him. I know that you can fix him. This would not have happened. You want to know how God feels? Do you want to know how God feels when you're suffering? Wherever you are, financially, you're down. Your family, I don't know. There's something. Maybe your health. I'm suffering right now. As I stand before you, I stand before you not with someone who is free of trouble and free of problems. There are things in our lives that we wrestle with. Jesus was in that room, or in maybe not that room, he was in the presence of those people as they were mourning the death of Lazarus. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. It's the shortest passage in the whole Bible. A little trivia for you. John chapter 11 and verse 35. He sees everybody around him. And it says, Jesus wept. God is not happy that you have to suffer. God is not on some vengeful streak because you are where you are right now. At the center of it all, God cares for you. Jesus knew that this was good. There was a purpose behind Lazarus' falling to sleep. There was a purpose behind it. Yet he knew even in the midst of that purpose that there was sorrow that these people were feeling. that my sister and my brother-in-law to this day, 5+ years after, are still suffering. They are still hurting. That the anniversary of her birthday and the anniversary of her death come within a couple of days of each other every year, and that they are filled with sorrow. Jesus weeps. Verse number 40. Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the very glory of God? Jesus brought Lazarus back to life. He had been in the tomb. He spoke, and Lazarus raised from life. And there's theological implications. We're not going to deal with that today. That's for another time. This is deeper than just this text on suffering. There's many things going on here, and there's many lessons. But God is glorified when he brings Lazarus out of the grave, and Lazarus comes back to life. The suffering servant, Jesus himself, facing the denial of friends, facing his death, facing the scourging, facing the punches in his face. They pulled the hair out of his beard, prayed in the garden, if there is any way that this could not happen, Lord, please, let's let it go that route. Take this cup from me. Not my will, but yours be done. And that's all he's asking. This issue with Lazarus was not about Lazarus. It wasn't about Mary and Martha. It wasn't about anybody that was attending that viewing or that time of mourning together. This was about Jesus. This was about glorifying God. And somewhere in your suffering, God uses the crap that the enemy puts into our lives. God doesn't put it there. We chose this. We chose this route through our grandparents, Adam and Eve. And God could have withdrawn and let this world perish. He could have just let it be after the sin of Adam and Eve. And we would have just destroyed ourselves. Or number two, he could have made a plan to save the world. And he has dealt with the cards that we have given him. And God is glorified. And our relationship with him is enriched when we lift spiritual weights. You realize that? When you lift weights, when you are in the weight room, you are tearing down your muscle. You are breaking your muscle. You are putting stress on that muscle. And when it heals stronger than it was at first. Oh, the time on this earth is small. The time on this earth is short compared to the infinite time with God, where there will be no suffering, no pain, and no tears. That what you are experiencing now is temporary. And it will glorify Christ. You can either, one, allow this world to dictate how you're dealing with your pain and your grief and your sorrow. Or, number two, you can develop a deeper relationship with God. What will it be? Will you choose temporary pleasure or eternal joy? That's what it comes down to. Job was about pursuing a relationship with God. You finished reading that book. He says, I want my chance with God. I want a chance to speak to him. And God spoke to him. And Job repented. Pursue the Lord. Pursue righteousness. Pursue a relationship with Jesus. And It may not end today, and it may not end tomorrow, and it may not end this year, but you are always in pursuit of a relationship with God. As I said before, there are things in my life right now that I am working through, things that I am trying to not give up. Blessed, happy, favor, grace to those who mourn, for you will be comforted. Receive your comfort today.